intersectional discrimination. Many discriminations combine together and leave upon a particular group or groups, even to their greater disadvantage. Discrimination strikes at the heart of a human being. It's harming someone's rights simply because of who they are and what they believe and what they may not believe. The hatred was built against each other. And one group always believed that the other group was to be ethnically cleansed. There's a discrimination based upon demonizing a community, demonizing an ethnic group against them. But what leads to discrimination? What leads to these prejudices? You have prejudice. At the heart of all forms of discrimination is a prejudice based on the concepts of identified as a race, as part of a race.
Hello everyone and welcome to the meeting with Sanal Idmarku. I am Shubhi Sinha, heading the youth wing of Rationalist International. I would like to welcome everybody who's present in this meeting and who has been joining us for quite a few years in our Clubhouse, YouTube and Zoom. Meeting will go on the similar way. Sanal sir will begin with his presentation for 60 minutes and then you can ask your questions related to the topic. Everybody present in this video meeting, I would request you all to keep your videos and audios both turned off for recording purposes. Only when you're asking a question, I would request you to turn them on. So now if we come to the topic for today, what is discrimination? If we talk about a proper definition of discrimination, it strikes at the very heart of being human, and it is harming someone's right simply because of who they are or what they believe. Discrimination is harmful and perpetuates inequality. We all have the right to be treated equally, regardless of our race, ethnicity, class, caste, religion, belief, sex, sexual orientation, characteristics, age, health, and so many more other status. Yet, all too often, we hear heartbreaking stories of people who suffer cruelty simply for belonging to a different group from those in positions of privilege or power. What drives discrimination and why does it still exist? What does one do about it? So, to answer so many of our questions, I would like to welcome Mr. Sanal Idmarku with us, and welcome, sir.
Thank you, Shubhi. Thank you, everyone. And to begin with, what is discrimination? That's the fundamental question we all have to deal with. As Shubhi rightly explained in the introduction, we all have the right to be treated equally, regardless of our race, ethnicity, nationality, class, caste, religion, belief, sex, gender, language, sexual orientation, gender identity, sex characteristics, age, health, or any other status. Yet, all too often we hear heartbreaking stories of people who suffer cruelty simply for belonging to a different group from those in position of privilege or power. What exactly is the reason for discrimination that exists all around, even after the experiences of 2 world wars and a wonderful international organization like the United Nations and a declaration of human rights that is valid for almost the whole world? Let's go into the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. What it clearly says is something so eye-opening. I'll read Article 2 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So Article 2 says, freedom from discrimination. Everyone can claim their rights regardless of sex, race, language, religion, social standing, etc. So the more elaborately it says, everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms set forth in the Declaration, without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth of status. Furthermore, no distinction shall be made on the basis of political or jurisdictional or international status of the country or territory to which the person belongs, whether it be independent, trust, non-self-governing, or under any other limitation of sovereignty. That's a very clear document. But some things are missing, which we know, which has been added later. But Article 7 of the same Universal Declaration of Human Rights say, right to equality before the law. The law is the same for everyone and should be applied in the same manner to all. That's Article 7. It further says, all are equal before the law and are entitled without any discrimination to equal protection of the law. All are entitled to equal protection against any discrimination in violation of this declaration and against any incitement to such discrimination. What beautiful sentences. It clearly gives an uncomparable position of the understanding of the problem of indiscrimination. You cannot discriminate anybody on the basis of their race, culture, language, gender, their sexual orientation, or anything. That's universally accepted. Still, in most part of the world, we face discrimination, one form or the other. And sometimes people are discriminated, but they would not understand they're discriminated. Sometimes they do not understand that the things that they are going through are a part of discrimination. They do not have an idea what could be discrimination, what could be an international understanding about discrimination and policies against discrimination. Let's come to some other documents before going deep into the subject. European Commission, one of the finest documents you can see, which is still more than the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So Article 21 of European Commission reads as follows. Any discrimination based on any ground such as sex, race, color, ethnic or social origin, genetic features, language, religion or belief, political or other opinion, membership of a national minority, property, birth, disability, age, or sexual orientation shall be prohibited. It's not allowed. It's a crime to practice any kind of discrimination based on all these things. Within the scope of application of the treaties and without prejudice to any of their specific provisions, any discrimination on grounds of nationality shall be prohibited. I'll read the first part once again. Look at each unit it insists. Any discrimination based on any ground, such as sex, race, color, ethnic or social origin, genetic features, language, religion or belief, political or any other opinion, membership of a national minority, property, birth, disability, age, or sexual orientation shall be prohibited. These all are prohibited. Can you discriminate someone because he is very young, because the person is not considered to be an adult. Does he have right? Yes, he has a right. Can you discriminate a very elder person from anything, including job, because of the age? It's not possible. It's discrimination. What a wonderful broad frame. Also, one has to see what is written in the Indian Constitution, which is one of the most modern constitutions of the world, and written by a huge number of people under the leadership of the drafting commission's chairman, was one of the greatest scholars of India, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. And it has compared the constitutions of Britain, of UK, of France, of Canada, Japan, and all these countries, and formulated a constitution based on that, and with our own experiences and our own statutes and other rules that existed from the past. So Article 15 of Constitution of India forbids discrimination on grounds of religion, race, caste, sex, and place of birth. These are the 5 things that are very clearly mentioned in the Indian Constitution. Many other things that are declared in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights or in the European Commission Charter are absent in India's discrimination law. But of course, it forbids discrimination on the grounds, but only of religion, race, caste, sex, or place of birth. If you're discriminated because of your disability, it's against morals, it's against the general laws, but it doesn't come as under the broad framework of the definition of discrimination. Discrimination on the grounds of conscience, no, it's not guaranteed there. So it's, limited, but still it accepts a major part of the whole thing. So, but also one has to see the background of this. On 29th November 1948, the Constituent Assembly debated the first version of Article 15 as Article 19 of the revised draft Constitution. The draft of Article 9 was as follows. 1. The state shall not discriminate against any citizen on the grounds only of religion, race, caste, sex, or any of them. In particular, no citizen shall, on grounds only of religion, race, caste, and sex, or any of them, be subject to any disability, liability, restriction, or condition with regard to A, access to shops, public restaurants, hotels, and places of public entertainment, or B, the use of wells, tanks, roads, and places of public resort maintained wholly or partly out of the revenues of the state or dedicated to the use of general public. And 2, nothing of this article shall prevent the state from making any special provision for women and children. So that was it. So this was members of the assembly wanted additional protection on grounds for prohibition or discrimination based on the family and descent. Other members argued further on that gardens, roads, and tramways should be included, etc., etc. But Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the chairman of the drafting committee, clarified very clearly that the text was sufficient to cover a large variety of spaces not specifically included in the article. So it was accepted after debate and amendment. The original text remained largely intact and became Article 15 of the Indian Constitution. After reading these, I've been curious about what was mentioned in the laws in Finland, just out of curiosity, which is one of the countries that which has a very strong stance against discrimination. So the Minister of Environment, and there is one ministry, equality and non-discrimination at the Ministry of Environment. So according to Section 6 of the Constitution of Finland, everyone is equal before the law. That's a sentence. Everyone is equal before the law. No one shall, without an acceptable reason, be treated differently from other persons on grounds of sex, age, origin, language, religion, conviction, opinion, health, disability, or other reason that concerns his or her person. Though their own actions, the public powers must be ensured and, on the other hand, must not prevent the equality and discrimination are attained in society as fully as possible. This has gone one step beyond the European Commission's Charter. So it's very interesting, the idea of, or the definition of discrimination, the scope of discrimination has been systematically extended further to include a lot of things which were not included earlier. Because we are understanding the nature of discrimination by way of understanding human nature, by way of understanding our own self over the time and over historic period. Our own values have changed. It has modified, it has improved, it has found new scope and grown into new horizon. And the value system that should gauge the idea about equality, idea of non-discrimination has grown and extended, and it's still further extending. I'm sure that after 20 years, 30 years, the idea about discrimination, the idea about tolerance, the idea about inclusiveness would further grow. Many things that we do not even consider that it is discrimination would be included and identified as discrimination in the coming years. Let's once again go into the equality and non-discrimination law in Finland, which is considered one of the finest in the whole section. I'm not glorifying Finland because I live in Finland, because this is a trying to understand the whole phenomenon by comparing it with different countries. Section 6 of the Constitution of Finland asks for equality of everyone before the law. No one shall, without an acceptable reason, be treated differently from other persons on the ground of sex, of age, of their origin, of their language, of their religion, of their conviction, of their opinion, of their health, of their disability, or any other reason that concerns his or her person. There are discussions all over the Scandinavia. Is almost the same in different Scandinavian countries, that this is not enough. There shall be more things to be included which are to be identified as discrimination. So the scope of identifying things that are not considered discrimination or as natural are more and more recognized and identified as part of discrimination in the, due course. Let's see what Amnesty International, one of the major organizations that stands for a clear, non-discriminatory worldview, what would they say? Amnesty says that we shall have the right to be treated equally regardless of our race, ethnicity, nationality, class, caste, religion, belief, sex, gender, language, sexual orientation, gender identity. That's a very interesting thing, which is not even in the Finnish constitution, which is not even in the European Commission, the gender identity. That is also a point of discrimination for many. Suppose a person who is seen or publicly identified as a male or female, but he may be feeling a different gender identity within that person, him or her. Is there a prejudice against such people? Can one choose one's gender? Can one have a prejudicial approach to them? If there is a discrimination in the society against the identification of one's own gender, which is not what is popularly accepted, and if there is a discrimination, shall we stand against that? The Amnesty International insists that it should be there. The sex characteristics, age, health, and other status, and it includes the gender identity. That is not there in the Indian Constitution. That's not there in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. That's not there in the European Commission's statement, but this is a further new step. It's important. That's how the scope of what we understand as discrimination is growing further with our own understanding and the growth of our own understanding about what is discrimination and what is equal treatment and what is equality. So what is the problem with discrimination? Discrimination strikes at the heart of a human being. It's harming someone's rights simply because of who they are and what they believe and what they may not believe. Discrimination, very, very clearly is harmful, and it perpetuates very clearly inequality. And inequality is not acceptable to any civilized society. So any kind of discrimination is asking for inequality, and inequality in front of law, and that is not acceptable to any civilized society. So discrimination occurs when a person is unable to enjoy his or her human rights or other legal rights on an equal basis with others because of an unjustified distinction made in policy, law, or even treatment. This idea is rooted in the principle of non-discrimination very clearly. Working with communities across the world, the challenge against discriminatory laws and practices are more and more identified. And there is a universal effort by activists working on this field for their rights and equality in all forms possible. Of course, discrimination can take different and various forms. Let's take it one by one. There are two types of discrimination. One is direct discrimination. The other is indirect discrimination. So simple like that. Direct discrimination is very well known. You belong to a race and a predominant race do not like you, or a race is considered not developed, not intellectually equipped, they are not intelligent enough, they are not worth it for good jobs. That's racial discrimination. The discrimination based on gender, it's all well known. Somebody believes that women are weaker sex or other sexes are not that able. They should be protected, and they want to be protectors of the other gender. And if they think that certain jobs can only be done by a certain gender, most of it's in favor of the male. It's clearly a gender discrimination. But to what extent? I have even heard people who belonging to the wide spectrum of free thought movement sometimes telling that, well, there should be equality, but I don't think all genders are equal. Women are a weaker sex. No, all studies in this field very clearly establish that there is no physical weakness or physical inability that any other sex as compared to other sexes. In fact, women are physically more fit, more able to handle hard situations, because one of the reasons that they have to be stronger than men is because they are the carriers of children. They have to look after human children. Unlike other animals, human children have to be looked after for the first year. And they have to carry the child 9 months and deliver the child. So they have to be physically fitter than men by nature of their own body structures. So it has been scientifically proved that women are fitter in normal situations than many of the men. But for centuries and centuries and centuries, they have been deprived and they have been pushed back. And many people would agree that there shall be equality, but there is an inherent weakness in women. That's a discriminatory mindset that is working. I've heard people speaking that women are less intelligent. There is a discriminatory mind that is working there. You would accept equality, but that's something like a benevolence, not like a natural thing. You would accept, coming to caste system, you would approve that other castes can also eat from a common table, that you would accept that there shall not be any untouchability, as if you are the custodian of the approach to them. You have to agree, you have to approve that others there cannot be any untouchability. No, you have no right. Nobody has the right to decide upon the life of other people or how to treat other people. Everybody is born equal and they shall live equal, and there shall not be any discrimination whatsoever it is coming from. It could come from religion, it could come from the religious texts, it could come from tradition, it could come from the national character, it should be coming from statements of some prophets, it could be coming from some of the epics, whatever it is. We live in a different age. We have a very, very clear understanding about what kind of discriminations have been existing all throughout. And we know that if religion said, or if prophets said, or if any community said, or if tradition said, if the caste ask for it, whatever it is, people are equal and there shall not be any kind of discrimination. There are, when I said about discrimination, these are specific discriminations, but there are intersectional discrimination. Many discriminations combine together and leave upon a particular group or groups, even to their greater disadvantage. For example, if a person who belonged to a community or caste or tribe, which was considered untouchable by another section of the people, like in India, that's one discrimination based on caste. But a woman from a caste which was considered to be untouchable, that person is having a secondary or an intersectional discrimination. One discrimination is based on the caste, and other discrimination is based on the gender, and still another discrimination based on the place where they live, another discrimination based on the economic status that they have, and another discrimination of, well, what kind of parentage you have. There are social discriminations existing about your heritage. What kind of educated parent do you have or not? But 4-5 discriminations intersectionally, if it is to be faced by one person, that will be very hard to fight against it. So the first thing that we have to understand is discrimination is not just one small sentence. It's not one classification that we have. It's spread with a lot of roots, cross going this way and that way. And that's everywhere in the society, whether we sometimes realize it or sometimes we do not realize. So another way of understanding discrimination, women of a minority group. For if a certain minority is considering women as a subjugated person, not as an equal person. I mean, maybe considered you as a farmland of the men. So you have a discrimination based on your faith. Then you have a discrimination because of your gender. And then you're denied equal financial rights. Right to work is denied for many people. So you face intersectional discrimination, and it will be very difficult, and you become weaker and weaker to fight against it when you are suppressed by intersectional discrimination. And some of these discriminations are quite toxic and rhetoric. There is an effort of demonizing communities. There is an effort of demonizing groups. There is an effort of demonizing political parties. Hatred is systematically built upon communities, against castes, against political parties, against ethnic groups, for political requirements of some people who are the custodians of power, or who has the influence upon public opinion making. they could identify a certain community as a very bad community. They are demonized by that. One good example is the Rohingyans in Burma or Myanmar. The Rohingyans, there was a vicious campaign against them. There was an effort of ethnic cleansing. So they cannot come out of it, that situation. Even if the whole world was standing for them, it was difficult to fight for them. Another great example, the ethnic demonization that the Tutsis and Hutus in Africa some years back. Two major communities, they hated each other. The hatred was built against each other. And one group always believed that the other group was to be ethnically cleansed. There's a discrimination based upon demonizing a community, demonizing an ethnic group. Another classical example, is Hitler's Germany. In Germany, the later part of the Hitler regime, they have identified the Jews and they were demonized. All the problems that Germany faced at the time, which actually was a result of the First World War and the defeat in the First World War, there was a huge economic crisis. And the reason was put upon the Jews because they were comparatively rich, they were the money lenders, and there was a hatred against them which was spreading so fast amongst the people who were suffering from the economic crisis. And added to it, there was a historic heritage of hatred. All throughout the regime of the Roman Catholic Church during the Roman Empire, there was systematic attack on the Jews. There was clear discrimination against Jews. There were popes who officially declared that the plague was a result of the presence of the Jews. They demonized them because, as per their story, the Son of God, Jesus Christ, was assassinated by a Jewish conspiracy. The Jews were disliked, hated, attacked. They were brandished and they were isolated. They were pushed into ghettos all around Europe over the Middle Ages. They ran for their life. They concentrated living in certain parts of the world, like in the present-day Poland. When Hitler defeated Poland and made the gas chambers and killed millions of them, the whole world did not react. The next country was Soviet Union. They did not react because there was a pact between Hitler and Stalin of non-aggression. Of course, Russia, the Soviet Union later joins the war to fight against Germany, but the demonization of the Jews and their elimination simply happened because everybody felt comfortable when the Jews were simply taken to the gas chambers, because there was an inherent discrimination and hatred in the minds of all these people. Nobody fought against that. Nobody took international public opinion to that core in the initial stages, because there was a prejudice that we all, our ancestors all around, had against the Jews. So this huge discriminatory mindset that people had coming from the demonization of communities, that can lead to a very serious crisis of human misery. So demonizing any community, demonizing any group, demonizing a political party, demonizing an ideology, all these kind of things include discrimination. Another two good examples how political ideologies were used to discriminate. You all know that the Iranian Revolution was successful because there was a coalition between the Muslim radicals and the then Communist Party there. There was a Communist Party there, they threw their party. And against The authority of Shah, the power center there, the monarch, there was a huge public uprising, mainly by the communists, pro-Moscow communists. And they decided strategically to join with the Islamic radical force to gain more support. There was a collaboration between the radical Muslims and the communists because they demonized the political climate there, the political authorities there, and the allies. But what happened? They could successfully overthrow the regime of Shah, and Ayatollah Khomeini, who was in exile in France, returns back to Iran and takes the charge of the country. But what happened was something that was unprecedented earlier. Very soon, the representatives of the Shahs were all executed. And once that's done, there was a kind of very clear understanding that the Islamic radicals who were in power that they had, they never wanted communists to be an ally. But they could come to power because the communists were more powerful than the Islamic radicals. It was with the support of the communists that they could come to power. In fact, the communists wanted, they mutually tried to win the other party. The Islamic radicals wanted to get the support of the communists to gain their strength, and the communists wanted the support of the Islamic radicals to gain their strength, and both of them wanted to overthrow the Shah regime. The Shah regime they could overthrow, but the power did not go to the communists, but went to the Muslim radicals. Once they stabilized their base, there was a very strong demonization that was going against the communists. That was very successful. They were seen as heretics. All the communists were arrested. All those leaders who supported the Iranian Revolution, which turned into the establishment of the Islamic Republic, they were all executed. And no one in the country seriously responded to that. Those people who were living outside and were some part of this left movement at that time, they were making sounds outside. But inside Iran, they could demonize the communists who were their political allies and get them all hanged. A political ideology, once it's demonized, can be very dangerous. The same thing happened, and another example, Indonesia. When Suharto comes to power, again, with the cooperation of the Communist Party to overthrow Sukarno, after establishing the power, the Communist Party, which was very, very powerful, was banned because they alleged a conspiracy, and all of them were arrested, and several thousands of them were executed very fast. Demonization of a political ideology. These are two examples where communists were attacked and discriminated, and their rights to survive in a political system was denied. On the other side, in Soviet Union, all those people who were opposed to Stalin were all considered anti-Soviet. They were sent to jails, and they were sent to the concentration camps, and they were discriminated against. So political ideologies are demonized sometimes. It's very easy to destroy them or annihilate them with that. So these are contemporary times. We know that the long history of caste system in India, during the discrimination that existed, in the highest form, of caste system, starting perhaps from the 2nd century onwards, a large section of the population were totally kept out of the political life and the economic life and social life. Their culture, their economic life, everything was pushed aside. They could survive as discriminated people. They themselves believed that this was natural. The karma theory, when it was presented in the classical form of it, gave them a justification or a kind of a self-justification why they are discriminated, why they are lower caste. It explained to them that they have done something wrong in the past life. So here in this life, You have to obey the rules of the caste system, obey the rules of the untouchability, obey the rule of oppression. Then you could get a better life in the next. I mean, in the idea of rebirth. So there was not only discrimination, but the victims of discrimination believed that it was important to follow the laws of discrimination. That is the classical case everywhere. Every time the victims are told that there is a reason for that. The victims are educated that there is a reason for their discrimination against them, and they would themselves believe it. The moment people realize that all this bondage of discrimination, all these ideas of suppression are all imposed, and all people are the same. No authorities, no religion, no political power, nothing can divide them. Once they realize that, all these things should go. Once you have a universal idea about the whole thing, about discrimination, then only we can fight against that. But what leads to discrimination? What leads to these prejudices of people? You have prejudice. At the heart of all forms of discrimination is a prejudice based on the concepts of identity. You are identified as a race, as part of a race. You are identified as part of an ideology. You are identified as part of a philosophy. You are identified as a part of a political party. You are identified as one gender. The fundamental idea of identity politics, or the fundamental idea of the social identity as a base of your existence, that's wrong. That is the foundation of all discrimination. Unless and until you fight against this identity concept, you cannot fight any kind of discrimination. So it can lead to division, it can lead to hatred, and it can even lead to dehumanization of other people, because they all belong to another identity. A caste can be an identity. A religion can be an identity. A privileged political party, membership in a privileged political party can be an identity. Once you are part of that, you feel that you're privileged and others can be discriminated against. If any political party, for example, in a single party system, in China, for example, if a member of the Communist Party feels privileged than the other citizens of that country, there is certainly a discrimination. Have we identified that in the scope of discrimination now? No, we haven't. In many countries, which are religious countries or theocratic countries, or countries which are governed by religious laws, citizens of other communities have to pay an additional tax. Certain rights are denied to them because of their religion. A good example is Saudi Arabia. You cannot get citizenship if you're not a Muslim. There is a discrimination very clearly in that country. So once what can you do against that? They all are part of an international community. If they all accept a universal idea of tolerance, universal idea of non-discrimination, would they agree to an idea that others who don't, for example, in many, for example, in Afghanistan, non-Muslims can exist. In Pakistan, non-Muslims can exist, but they have to pay an additional tax for protection. The idea of protection of other communities than the official community stems from discrimination. Any country that thinks that it has a national political ideology and members of that party are privileged, there is discrimination. If any country believes that there is a national religion and members of other religions, of other faith or non-believers are not the privileged people, there is discrimination. So the whole idea that we are speaking about discrimination or against discrimination in practice is simply not respected in many countries. Well, some of the governments reinforce their power and their status quo by openly justifying discrimination in the name of morality, for example. For example, if one is of a different sexual orientation in Saudi Arabia or in United Arab Emirates or in Afghanistan or in Iran, the authorities feel that they are the moral custodians, and they know what is good and what is bad, and what is moral and what is immoral. And on the basis of their judgment about morality and their judgment about what is good and bad, they would discriminate people with other ideas. They can be punished. There can be written laws to punish them. Very clearly, those are discrimination. Sometimes women are discriminated on another different ground also. Menstruation is considered bad in many traditions. In most of the Indian ritualistic traditions, those women who are, for example, who are practicing Hinduism are not allowed to perform a ritual because they have menstruation at that time. It's taken as a secondary discrimination point. There is a discrimination on the basis of their gender. Then there is a discrimination on if a natural physiological phenomenon. In some of the temples, or most of the temples, women are not allowed to enter when they have menstruation. In earlier times, women were not allowed to come to the main part of the house, and they have some extended rooms or a corner somewhere to remain there till the menstruation is over. In thousands and thousands and thousands of families in India, women are not allowed to enter the kitchen when they have menstruation. It's a discrimination based on a natural human phenomenon. But it's not only in India, in Africa, the same kind of taboo on women with menstruation existed amongst many tribes. So the belief system adds a certain new levels of discrimination. What could be right and what could be wrong? It's all based on the tribal belief system that people followed and which carried forward without any questioning, without any justification, or without any scientific sanction. So let's see what are the key forms of discrimination. I try to classify the whole thing. One is, as we have discussed, the racial and ethnic discrimination. So that's one of the key forms of discrimination. And I mentioned about the genocide in Rwanda in 1994. Apartheid, you all know, that existed in South Africa. So these all shows very clearly a kind of ethnic as well as racial discrimination, which we have seen in a very large scale. In South Africa, people of the Black origin, Black race, what they called, were not allowed to go to restaurants. They could not go to cinema theaters. They could not travel in the trains. They could not buy a house in the areas where white people were living. And there was a clear segregation. Officially, legally, there was a segregation on the basis of race in a huge country. Now apartheid is over. It was a long fight. It's a historic fight that the last century has seen. But we hear about a new discrimination that exists in South Africa against some other people who immigrate to their country. Both are from the Black community, but there is a discrimination against people coming from the neighboring countries for better jobs. Discrimination against migrants. That exists in almost all parts of the world. In Britain, though officially discrimination against migrants is not allowed, it exists. In Germany, There have been attacks on Romanians and Vietnamese, mainly because they thought the immigrants have been taking away the jobs. These jobs were not filled by other people. So discrimination based on a kind of a xenophobia, fear against the strangers coming from aliens, fear against people who have immigrated, fear against those people who look different, who come from a different country. So this exists in a very big way. So the Rwandan genocide in 1994 was a very clear case of large-scale atrocities, just butchering of the people based on their ethnic origin. There was no racial conflict. They both belonged to the same race, and they belonged to two ethnic communities. 10,000s of people were butchered just because there was a prejudice, there is a discrimination because of their, ethnic origin. In Europe, there was very serious discrimination against the Romani people. You know what's the Romani people? In India, people call them the Kabuliwala, the nomads. In Europe, they are called Romanis. In Germany, the millions and millions of Romanis are kept away and discriminated in Germany. In Germany, they were identified and they were thrown out of the country. Now it's an internationally recognized discrimination against Romanis, and they are accepted and recognized officially, but there is a prejudice. I've seen it in Europe, in many countries. In Poland, you can see in Warsaw, there are a lot of Romanis who are by nature nomads. Many people think that they are not fit to the modern society. They don't prefer to live in closed apartments, but the states are trying to support them, trying to integrate them into the system. But they have certain behavior patterns. So there is a huge discrimination against Romanis, which is recognized, which is identified, which is fought against by many of the countries. Now, immigrants I mentioned, but one could classify them as the discrimination against non-nationals. Look at India. One of the major discrimination points is, are these people immigrants from Bangladesh? Okay, even if people are immigrants from Bangladesh, are they to be discriminated against? In most of the world countries can take in immigrants. The right to asylum is recognized as one of the major rights of people. If there is a problem in their country, people can move to other countries, and that's recognized everywhere. So, but there is a discrimination against those people who come from other countries. In India, there is a discrimination against those people who come from Bangladesh. In Bangladesh, there is a discrimination against those people who come from Chittagong, from Burma. Through the Chittagong borders. Also, in many parts of Europe, especially in Eastern Europe, you see a strong sense of discrimination against people who come from other countries. In Germany, I remember some years back when I was traveling, I saw very popularly a very popular bump sticker on a car. More Kinder, less Indians. Means one should produce more children to avoid Indians coming in large quantities. Why? Because most of the computer jobs have no people to work. Indian experts are coming and working and filling in the responsibilities. In Germany, a lot of Indian doctors are working. The far right formally, defends the idea of discrimination. To all those people who are xenophobic, who stand for, anti-immigration policies, they all belong to generally the far right, the radicals, the extremist force in all these countries. They all stand against the immigrants. And in Eastern Germany, before the unification of Germany, the eastern part of the Germany, which was the communist Germany, they were immigrants from Vietnam to fill up jobs. Well, the Vietnamese were beaten up in their homes many times by the ultranationalists. On the other side, in the Western Germany, they were immigrants from other parts of the Eastern Europe. They were also beaten up. There was a very strong anti-immigration discrimination amongst the people, not by government's policies, but the far-right people are instigating hatred against the immigrants. Xenophobia is justified. A stranger is not to be accepted. That's the idea. So that is often taken as a tool to address the economic issues of the country. Sometimes you are simply told there is an economic crisis. That's because there are immigrants from other countries. In fact, these immigrants are working hard and contributing to the wealth of these countries, all immigrants everywhere. In Britain, how the South Asians have contributed to the wealth of Britain is established in several academic studies. How they have contributed to the wealth of Britain. But still, there is a hatred somewhere. A South Asian can easily be called a Paki and identified differently there in Britain. All over Europe, in many parts, you can see such feelings. Immigrants are discriminated against because the hatred is built up because they are aliens. So xenophobia is one strong form of discrimination. So now coming to discrimination on the, against the people who belong to the LGBTQ community. That's very strong, actually. There is a strong fight against this discrimination. Some of the countries very systematically try to educate people about their rights. The Pride Days, for example, which were originally, taken out by the LGBTQ people as their campaign, is now officially recognized by governments to educate people against discrimination involving that. You must all be remembering about the Canadian Premier participating in a demonstration of the people of LGBTQ background or their supporters, the Pride Parade. The Prime Minister himself was there in the forefront. I've seen a similar thing in Finland some years back. I think before the outbreak of the pandemic, Corona, when there was a national Pride Day was celebrated. I was driving in the city and I was so happy seeing the LGBTQ flag on the Central Railway Station. Half a kilometer further, I found on the Parliament House. That was to recognize the rights of these people and to stop all kinds of discrimination. Later on the television, I saw the parade. And to my surprise, the LGBTQ people and their rights are denied by many religions, especially the Catholic Church is very strongly against their rights. But the Archbishop of the Evangelical Lutheran Church, the biggest church in Finland, was in the forefront with a flag leading the struggle, leading this parade. Okay, but not only him. The then Prime Minister of Finland also was in the parade to recognize the right of these people. That was to give a kind of respect to the right of people about their orientation. Homophobia is taken as a very serious offense in most of the Scandinavian countries. But it's not the same thing in some other countries. If you go to Poland, still a European Union country, there are laws that discriminate against the gays and lesbians, or even the gender identity of people that they could choose is not recognized. So these are areas where we need a lot of effort to stop discrimination. These are identified as discriminatory, but many countries still could have death penalty if you have a different sexual orientation. In Uganda, for example, in 2019, the Ethics and Integrity Minister announced government was planning to include death penalty for even consensual same-sex or sexual acts. And South Korea, they would be punished if they are of the same sex and having mutual interest. But many people do not even understand why it's discriminated, and it's something wrong to discriminate people. One of the classics of the left ideas, one of the classical heroes, Che Guevara, he has written very strong public condemnation of gays and lesbians. They have been fighting for equality and non-discrimination on the basis of economics, but they would not want to understand or identify discrimination on the basis of individual sexual preference. So there are double standards for most of these people. Maybe lack of ignorance, maybe lack of knowledge about things, and maybe simply because of ignorance or coming out from their own tradition of faith. There is discrimination based on a woman's right to have power on one's own body, whether one should have a child or not. Who would decide? If a woman decides that she would not need a child, if she got pregnant, I mean, she should have the right to abort it. But there is a discrimination against her right in many countries. It's not permitted in most of the Latin American countries. There is a strong discrimination against her right. The gender discrimination is the hardest, perhaps, despite the laws that everywhere exist. So kingdoms like Saudi Arabia, you cannot work at night. In Madagascar, you cannot do that. In Equatorial Guinea, you cannot do that. So if you get a divorce, you lose all your property in some of the countries. You cannot exercise control on your own property if you're married. That should be looked after by your husband or your father if you're not married. So despite all these new ideas about discrimination, even the right to vote was not granted to people on the basis of gender till recently. It was not very fast, very, very far off that we had a discrimination against women to vote. I think the first country that broke this traditional law was New Zealand. Second country was Finland, and many countries later did it. But also, there was discrimination on the rights of people, whether you can have a person as your own slave. By taking away the right of freedom of people, slavery was justified in many countries. Even when the First Amendment of Freedom was passed in the United States, slavery was justified, and many of the great campaigners of individual rights were owners of slaves. They did not understand that, or their understanding about discrimination did not grow to that extent. That's why I said that the idea of discrimination is totally entangled with our own prejudices or our own ignorance. So more and more areas are to be identified and liberated, and more areas are to be opened up. And we have to identify any area where there is any form of discrimination exists, and to carefully see that the discrimination is terminated there and people are treated equally, no matter what race they come from, no matter what tradition they come from, no matter what nation, identity, gender, age, whatever it is. All humans are equal. All are absolutely equal. No discrimination and absolutely no discrimination. That shall be the rule of the future. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. On this note, we can move on for the questions. If anybody has a question, please raise your hands to the hand raise icon tool below. I will just go through Clubhouse and Zoom both. Okay, so we have Kunjatu Chandrahasa with us on Zoom. I would request you to unmute yourself and proceed.
Yeah, thank you, Sanal, for giving a very detailed description on the various types of discriminations happening all over the world. It is clearly indicated that the country should not practice discrimination, and in various constitutions also it is elaborated. My question is, suppose those countries, if they violate, is there any punishment like thing evolved, or is it just writing a letter to those countries or asking them to observe what is indicated in the constitution and not to follow discrimination? Or is there a specific intention of correcting those countries by the United Nations or any other world body? This is what I wanted to know. Of course, all the constitutions have indicated in various articles about this, but the deterrent or the punishment, if they don't follow this, is there anything commonly agreed principles are there on that? That is what I wanted to know.
Thank you very much for that question. But unfortunately, most of the countries have come to they have agreed to the idea of non-discrimination. But there are many countries that they haven't agreed to the idea of discrimination also. The idea of non-discrimination also. For example, Madagascar, Saudi Arabia, and Papua New Guinea, and many of these countries have not even come to the idea of non-discriminatory approach. South Africa did not come to this idea till apartheid was over. But if any of the country violated the ideas of Universal Declaration of Human Rights nowadays, at this moment, it can be condemned. But there is no action possible by United Nations. United Nations does not have a right to take an action against a country. It can pass a resolution. And if it goes beyond the limit, it can decide to apply sanctions on those countries. But there is no way that they can interfere. But in Europe, the European Commission has a court. If in any country, any of the rights are violated, one can go to the European court, and that court's decision is valid in any of the European country. So that's no action possible, but you can go to a court of justice against that. And even if your country denies that, you can go to the European Commission's court, the European Court of Justice, and where a decision can be overturned, a decision can be made, and that to be valid in these countries.
And continuing this, now countries which violate these human rights, are they being listed by the United Nations? And which country is practicing the more violation, and which are the least violated country? Why I'm telling is, even in India also recently, that from the USA, there is a continuous letters being given that we are not practicing we are violating human rights cases, and even as the latest last week also, there was an observation by the US the senators telling that India is not following their ranking is very poor in the human rights the practicing. Like that, where do India stand on that? Is there any, are we very bad country, or just I wanted to know, or the gradation countries? You said that New Zealand is in the top and New Zealand is in the top, but where India stand, any idea? You can just give an idea. So,
there are many agencies, especially initiated by United Nations, to identify the level of where countries, ranking the countries on the basis of human rights, of press freedom, of happiness. There are many ways to handle it, to identify it. For example, India is not coming at the top in, for example, human rights or happiness or political freedom or even free press.
Yes.
But United States is also not at the top position there. But there are private agencies in United States. For example, some senators have made a separate body and they want to make certain positions, but that has no validity than public opinion making validity. That has no influence. For example, United Nations cannot take action on a country, but they can pass a resolution. But any resolution passed by United Nations, also one has to understand, can be vetoed. There are 5 superpowers, they can veto. Any of them opposes it, that does not pass.
Okay.
So these
Yeah.
kind of decisions are influenced by the political positions that you have in the international frame. So
Okay.
one of the most trusted ways to understand where we stand is reports of Amnesty International, which is a very recognized and very respected international body, which got a Nobel Prize for its stance. Mainly, it's an organization based in UK and
Okay.
spread all over the world, which is for the rights of the prisoners of conscience.
Okay.
And they fight very powerfully. For example, when Badawi was one person in Saudi Arabia who has written some post against the political authorities critically, and he was imprisoned and he was given 100 whips every week on Friday on his back for several months. And finally, with the interference of Amnesty International, he could be released some months back. So Amnesty International is a very powerful body, but sometimes their appeals are also not taken seriously by political powers. So despite their campaigns, people are hanged. Also, one has to understand that not believing in any God or defying the faith in that Muhammad was the last prophet, you can get death penalty in 16 countries.
Yeah.
Most of them are Muslim majority countries.
Correct. Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for the explanation. Yes.
Thanks for this opportunity. Discrimination is existing all over the world, I think, including United States and India too. Even though there are written rules not to do so. So I think discrimination can be controlled, I think. I don't know if this can be wiped out.
Your voice is
because crimes are taken place in the United States on discrimination. Even though Emancipation Law came 1863 during Abraham Lincoln, that freedom was not given to black people. It even came after like 2.5 years, even came to the state of Texas. Now recently, Juneteenth is a public holiday signed by President Biden. It's been celebrated widely in the United States on 19th of June. I think in India also same thing is happening. Even though they are trying, the privileged community always are discriminating on other people. Even though they are trying, I think they are trying to appoint Miss Draupadi Murmu. I think they are choosing her as a candidate of President of India. That's a good step. But do you think this will help to eliminate discrimination in India or in United States? I think it is only can be controlled and make awareness. And besides this, in all the businesses, there are joint commissions. They come every 2 years or something and evaluate their policies and functions. If they didn't pass, if they didn't correct their mistakes, license are denied. So discrimination may exist. We can control. What's your opinion? Sanal sir may explain. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Kunyama. I mean, the whole idea is, see, crimes exist. There is police departments, there is the jurisprudence, the justice department, everything is there. Still, crimes exist. But the ideal position is crimes should not exist. So there are many ways to handle it. One is decriminalizing most of the things that are considered crimes. Was one way. Second thing is finding what is the impulse of people to do crime. That's to be identified. That's to be handled. So you can reduce crime, but still there could be crime. That's one way of seeing it. Similarly, you could say that we can reduce the impact of discrimination. You can reduce the discrimination as much as possible, but there should be a strong moral pressure against any kind of discrimination. And we have to see that any kind of discrimination is taken care of, and that has to be taken very seriously so that a general atmosphere grows. But it's not only that identifying certain things as discrimination and stopping them as much as possible, but also expanding the scope of discrimination. the idea, there are many things which are considered, normal for many people, are actually discrimination. So expanding the scope of the idea of discrimination is one thing. If that is to be addressed and if that has to grow in that level, we have to identify more and more stringent action against those who violate, discriminatory, the idea of non-discrimination. Of course, that's the way to handle it. And if a president comes from a community that is discriminated, for example, from the scheduled tribe community, as India probably would get a president soon from the scheduled tribe community, will it end discrimination against the scheduled tribes in India? No, that would be overambitious. We had a person coming from the scheduled caste community, section as president, but still there is violation against the Dalits, and there is discrimination against Dalits. And if we get a new president in India who is from the scheduled tribe community, that would be a symbol that shows that we accept this thing. And that nobody is discriminated when she or he comes to that position because of their background or their caste or anything of any discriminatory divisions. But will that end the discrimination? No, but it will be a symbol. It should be something to tell, something to celebrate. Like Barack Obama became the president of the United States of America. Did that end all discrimination against the Black community? No, but it became a symbol. It became a very powerful symbol that a person with Black origin can become the president of America. But that is not a guarantee to end anything, but a line towards that direction. Yeah, thank you for that thought that it is still existing and we cannot end it totally, but we can only go closer to something that is, dreamt about. Thank you.
Thank you. So my question is actually on the Rwanda refugee migration plan of the UK. So it seems as though the government is really stuck between, providing the refugees a place to live and exist, but at the same time there is also the consideration or the racial aspect of it. I think it's only fair that people start questioning the ethics behind it or the reason as to why they would even consider another country as a safe space or a safe place for refugees while not giving them an acceptance in the UK. But there is also the other side where the extreme left side lawyers or, people who say that, we can't send people to Rwanda, they are human beings. But, when they say that, they don't realize that they are automatically discriminating a country or a culture, by saying that human beings can't be there when there are human beings there. There is a culture there, and the country has made significant improvements in the history, throughout the time to get to where it is today. So, it's not something that you only see in the UK. We see that across the globe. But the question I have is, where is this headed? What would be, do you think the UK or at least the Western society is capable of addressing this issue without some, the agenda makers taking advantage of the situation and, sort of diverting people from what the real issue is? So that was my question.
Yeah, very, very, very interesting, and good that you brought out this issue of in UK. If those illegal migrants, if you want to classify it correctly, were to be sent to some African country, either Uganda or some other country, one of the fundamental things that is forgotten clearly is there's a choice for people. Where would I live is my choice. And where would this illegal migrant in their categorization would go and live shall be their choice. They cannot be sent to some country not of their choice. That's the whole question. If somebody comes to a country, there are international norms how a person could come to a country. If one has persecution in their places, And people are migrating everywhere. And there are people still migrating to Britain. The only question is these people apparently are illegal migrants and their cases are still impending. Could somebody simply send them to some country of not their choice? That's your question. Or could they be sent back? That could be dangerous. They would simply die there. So this has to be addressed on the basis of the merits of the issue. I would always feel that there should be some kind of a humane approach to the whole thing. Because why would people migrate to Britain? They would migrate not only that there is a crisis in their country, they are willing to work. If they are willing to work, if they are not dependent on the state for their survival, why shouldn't they be considered, as immigrants and their work taken into the national structures of Britain? Britain is a kind of a crucible of different cultures. The colonies have brought in a lot of people from all around the world. Why shouldn't it simply accept some more people? Anyway, they have taken a lot of people. Why should they be sent to a country, in that case, not of their choice? That's the whole problem. I would say that there is something seriously wrong in the whole idea of the fear of immigration and xenophobia, but it also comes from we are privileged. We don't want underprivileged people to come and become part of this privileged community. That's a kind of discrimination also. So how to address this question? So one possible solution could be asking these people of their choice if Britain cannot take these people, and to see what countries would be willing to take them. Instead of packing them to some other country with an agreement, is something which is not respecting the right of these people to live at a place of their choice. That's the whole problem. So one can even give an option. And there can be different countries which could make offers. I don't know whether Canada would be interested to take some of them, or Australia. All these countries are looking for immigrants. And if they are willing, why don't they allow to go there? Why don't Britain try to absorb some of them if they are of their, fundamental criteria, if they pass their fundamental criteria? Instead of another major thing that is to be addressed is economic migrants are not coming because they don't want their areas of their living, not because they don't like their areas where they were living, but because they have certain discrimination, a geographical discrimination against them in their areas. Even if they work hard, they cannot have a good life. They are looking for, a better life. That's nothing wrong. People have only one life and they want to live a better life. Why don't the international community think of solutions at the ground level, making the life better in all parts of the world by an equitable distribution of life standards to the extent possible? When people are secure in their countries, if they can live there happily, if they can have a dignified life in their own country, many of these people would not risk their life by traveling in boats and all and try to reach other countries. There is an effort, there is a dream to live a better life. That's what is driving them. And one should have a kind eye to that. But all the same, a government can decide whether they want people or not. But these people should have a choice. An option should be open to them instead of packing to one place. This has been a policy of Britain long back also. For example, when slavery ended in Britain, all the slaves who were liberated were sent to a new country. A new country was established, Liberia. And they were sent to Liberia and they were not allowed to remain here. So this could be a policy of Britain, but at the same time, I would stand for the right of the people to decide about their future and their destiny. Thank you.
Okay, so recently there was this interview on LBC, which is, I'm sure you know, the London radio, and there was this former conservative politician who was talking about the current status of the parliament and, kind of sharing his views on what is going on with the Boris Johnson government at the moment. And he said something which actually came across as a shock to me, because he said the current governing party, even though we know them as conservative, they're not actually conservative. They are actually acting like an English nationalist party. And I was quite surprised, because I always thought that there was, the people who actually feed off of polarizing people. So people who encourage the woke culture on one side, and there is people who encourage xenophobia and, all the other discrimination on the other side. And I thought that the government was actually stuck. But then again, this perspective, I thought it was rather interesting. But I would like to know your take on it. Do you think that Boris Johnson's government is actually not representing conservative values, or that that they are actually behaving like an English nationalist, party, or I can also explain it as basically being a racist, or all of that kind of the British supremacism? What's your take on this? Thank you.
That's a very tricky question. I would appreciate the economic values the Conservatives try to project based on a strong economy. On the other side, the Labour, for example, that stands for the rights of people, or economic rights of the deprived on the other side, both are some important aspects of public understanding. I think when an opposition demands certain positions, and when Labour comes to power, they will have to follow many of the positions taken by the Conservatives, and if Labour is in power, they have to accept many positions that is represented by the Conservatives as well. That's why the two major divisions coexist, because by including the opposition of the other sides, but whether they would be, the Conservatives are not really going with the conservative values, but they are going into the nationalistic line. It's a question that's very, very sensitive, because this I have seen in many other countries also. The right-wing radicals or the right-wing nationalists at one side are making a pressure on governments. And their support base is very limited, 5 to 6% only. But this can swell, this can increase. So the political pressure these people make sometimes force these people in power, though they may not be actually following the nationalistic groups, but to be inclusive with some of the ideas so that their ranks are not swollen with that. It's not increased with that. So there is a political pressure, and the social interest groups and political pressure groups have a great influence in policy formulation, even when the people who actually the decisions are taken at different level, but they are also influenced by the opposition from right as well as from the left. Like the Labour's views on many things are absorbed so that they don't get mileage. The nationalist ideas are partially sometimes taken so that they don't get mileage. These are political compulsions that people are in different situations. I would say that there should be larger public education to get people understand the liberal values of Britain, which is more important and which is more to be respected, and not to go under the pressure of the right-wing nationalist groups. That would be the ideal situation.
We all know in India, women faces a lot of discrimination. So my question is, I've been to a few countries in Europe, but I couldn't find seats reserved for women in public transportation buses. But do you think is it a positive discrimination in India? We all speak of women empowerment, but reserving seats. So in my view, we are seeing them as a weaker section. So do we have to stop such reservations in the buses?
Yeah, I would personally feel that, this is something, in a way, the special seats meant for women also is a kind of a protective approach that these governments try to follow. In most of the states, road transport is mainly controlled by the state governments. And these are to be improved and changed, because I mean, also there are, you know, social understanding of people that a man should not sit near a woman. I've seen in when I was studying in Kerala, I've seen, for example, if the seats are empty, and if there is one woman sitting there and 2 seats are empty near her, and men are standing, even elder people standing, and they would not sit there. If somebody dares to sit, this person who thinks that, I mean, that's a reserved seat for women, would immediately stand up, showing her protest. So we should have more and more public education. Equality is not only getting some reservation for you. That's not the way this discrimination, I mean, has to be handled, but understanding that the genders have no difference. And women should be able to sit anywhere without any harassment. And men should be able to sit anywhere near a woman without their feeling harassed also. Because also the public understanding about how to behave in a public vehicle has to grow also. This has to be addressed. There should be enormous public education required to address this question. I'm not for reserving seats for women in public transport. But if a person is pregnant or old or having a physical disability to stand by oneself, they should give some, I mean, protection, like in anywhere in the world. If you cannot stand because of your age or because of your illness, you should have an opportunity. If somebody is pregnant or one is carrying little children, they should get, you know, there should be a public understanding also that, I mean, others who are able immediately give them a seat. And if some seats provided to them, that would be perfectly okay in my view. But just because you belong to a different gender, that you have special places, is at least not appropriate in states where this kind of discrimination is on the way, where it is going away. But if there is a situation in some state that women are not normally allowed in the normal situation to travel properly without being harassed, it could be considered. But in at least in Chennai, it should not be there. In Bangalore, it should not be there. In Hyderabad, it should not be there. In Delhi, it should not be there. In Calcutta or Mumbai, it should not be there. And in Kerala, anywhere, it should not be there. But it still happens in many other places. I mean, all these places as well.
Good evening again. Thanks, Mr. Sanal sir. You know, when Miss Amy talked a while ago, then something crossed in my mind. In the United States, there is 11 million people have no status. They are living here for many, many years. You know, their children are not citizens. During Obama's time, they give him DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. Still, immigration laws are not reformed. I don't know why they are not reformed yet. You know, what is the pain of a young person or a family without status living in such a super advanced industrialized country like the United States? If I didn't say a word behind for them, I think I'm not doing my duty. So I am bringing them 11 million people living in United States without status. What a pain it is. You may reflect on this. So everybody know, in all the countries, there are real bad, painful bad discriminations are existing. China, there is, and Russia, there is everywhere. So we all need to at least talk about this occasionally. It was so good. Sir Sanal sir brought this subject and discussed. You may reflect on this if you like. I don't know if you can say something. Thank you.
Yeah, I fully appreciate that position that you say that, I mean, people are discriminated, not of their mistake, but why, for example, people go to other countries and get into traps like this. The problem fundamentally is there is an economic deprivation in many parts of the world. Many people are discriminated economically in many parts of the world. So they would like to go to a better place. And they cannot be permanently put under this kind of non-citizenship or no status people, because their lives are gone with that. One has to find solutions. Every time the politicians will have compulsions coming from the far right at one side and economic compulsions or practical compulsions on the other side. And one should think of this situation instead of pushing these people on the other side of the fence and forgetting about it while speaking about very important other things that they think. You have to think that there are people, the problems that we addressed, and one has to find practical solutions to address the self-respect of these people, rights of these people, and we have to guarantee that nobody is discriminated because they are stranded somewhere, though they not of their choice. Even if it was their choice, we should find a way that people are living as people. People are living without discrimination. And how to handle it, it can differ, from country to country, situation to situation, and time to time. But the spirit should be accommodating people, including people, and avoiding any kind of discrimination.
So I think other than that, we don't have any other questions. So I believe we can conclude the meeting for today. So thank you everybody for joining and staying and understanding the whole concept of discrimination. And thank you, sir, for explaining it in such a well mannered way and with such an in-depth of the same term. And thank you everybody, and hope to see you all next week.
Thank you, everybody. And we see next Thursday with another interesting topic. Thank you.